Hi, I'm USA Today bestselling author Jennifer Youngblood. Thanks for joining me for one chapter a day, the clean romance way. Today I'll be reading chapter 13 of her Crazy Rich Fake Fiancé. Time for some Christmas karaoke. I'm excited. Here we go. Chapter 13. Wyatt and Ellie stood on the platform in the media room, their backs to the screen that took up the entire wall. Wyatt had done the karaoke rendition 100 times before, but tonight he was nervous. He clenched his fist. No, not nervous, excited. He looked out at the group of people, his eye resting on the object of his excitement, Bryn. She looked gorgeous in a cream sweater which offset her dark, lustrous hair. When she felt his gaze, she flashed a sunny smile, warming his insides. Bryn seemed to be faring well with his family. She had held her own with Aubrey, which was no easy task. He frowned, thinking of his older sister. She was a pain in the neck, so rigid and judgmental. He felt someone watching him and looked to where Kat was sitting. When she realized she'd caught his eye, she flashed a hopeful smile. He offered a polite smile and broke the connection. Wyatt laughed inwardly, thinking of how worried he'd been about coming home for Christmas, knowing he had to face Kat. He'd been devastated when he learned of Kat's betrayal. Until he met Bryn, he'd been smitten with Kat. She was his greatest weakness. A part of him feared that he might not have the strength to resist Kat's wiles if he came home alone, which is why he originally wanted to bring Bryn. That and appeasing his mom and dad. Seeing Kat now, Wyatt realized how lacking she was in comparison to Bryn. Sure, Kat was as beautiful as ever, with her polished blonde hair and stylish clothes showcasing her willowy figure, but she couldn't hold a candle to Bryn. Not only was Bryn incredibly beautiful, but she was also warm and compassionate. The most important part? Bryn made Wyatt want to be a better person. The time they'd spent together the past few days had been some of the greatest of Wyatt's life. He never wanted to be apart from Bryn again. He jerked in surprise, realizing the significance of his thoughts. He looked at Bryn, an intimate connection passing between them as she grinned. Warmth flowed over him, and with that warmth came the knowledge that Bryn was the one, his haven. She held up two thumbs as if to say, "You've got this." He laughed, anticipation racing through his veins. He glanced sideways at Ellie, who was donning her ugly Christmas sweater. She wiggled her eyebrows, an impish grin tipping her lips, making her look like a teenager. "You ready, big brother?" she taunted. "Yes, ma'am," he drawled. "Oh, you forgot your antlers." She rushed to the front row of chairs and grabbed them off a seat. He groaned. "Not those. I thought you were going to forget about those this year." "Never." She let out an airy laugh, tossing her hair as she handed them to him. "I wear the sweater and you wear the antlers. That's the deal." He let out a dramatic sigh. "All right, if I must, I must." He placed the antlers on his head, evoking laughter from the people sitting in the theater chairs, waiting for the show to begin. His dad gave him a nod. "You ready?" "Here are the microphones," his mom said, handing them to Wyatt and Ellie. "Ready," Wyatt said, as his dad pressed the button on the remote. The familiar introductory jingle of "Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer" came through the speakers. The words would be displayed on the screen behind them, but Wyatt and Ellie knew every lyric by heart. They started dancing goofily, evoking rounds of laughter. Wyatt looked at Bryn, who was sporting a smile the size of Texas. Then he and Ellie started singing, hamming it up for the audience. Haven's heart felt light enough to fly as she clapped along with the audience. It was fun watching Wyatt and Ellie perform. That they looked so utterly ridiculous only added to the experience. She appreciated how Wyatt could laugh at himself. Also, she was touched by how close Wyatt and Ellie were. Near the end of the song, Connor and Noah jumped up on the platform and danced beside Wyatt and Ellie. Wyatt gave Noah the antlers. Connor turned his back to the audience and began shaking his behind. "Connor!" Aubrey gasped loudly, her face straining. She looked like she might jump up and pull him off stage, but Christopher caught her arm and whispered something in her ear, causing her to settle down. Haven saw the look of pride on Charles and Beverly's faces as they watched their children and grandchildren. A lump formed in Haven's throat. To be part of a family during Christmas was priceless, maybe even worth the trouble that would soon follow. Haven looked surreptitiously at Neil and Lois Schneider, Kat's parents. She could tell that Charles and Beverly were close friends with the couple. The Schneiders seemed pleasant but a little uptight. Haven didn't have to look at Kat to know she was staring. She could feel Kat's envious eyes on her. It was obvious that Kat was still interested in Wyatt. Kat was gorgeous, the kind of girl who looked like she'd be best friends with Bryn. Kat seemed to have it all together. Like the others in this room, Kat exuded confidence. It was hard not to feel inferior. Haven had to keep reminding herself that Wyatt wanted her. Haven was relieved when she saw how quickly Wyatt dismissed Kat's eye contact. He had turned his attention to Haven, showering her with affectionate looks. When the song ended, Wyatt jogged up to sit beside her. He slid his arm around her shoulders and kissed her cheeks. Tingles circled down her spine, and her cells swirled to life being so close to Wyatt. "Your turn next," he whispered. Her heart clutched as she angled to face him. "No way am I getting up there." He laughed, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Time for silver bells," Ellie announced. "All the women come down." She looked at Haven, "Including you, Bryn." Haven sat, glued to her seat. Her mind gave the signal to move, but she was frozen. "Go on," Wyatt urged, giving her back a gentle nudge. Somehow Haven managed to get to her feet. Her legs felt like limp noodles as she walked down to the platform. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Lois and Kat coming down too. This could get interesting. To her dismay, Kat stood right beside her. "You look petrified, like you're going to puke," she uttered in a low tone, giving Haven a smug look. That's all it took to quell her nerves. Haven straightened to her full height, ignoring the comment. She would sing her heart out just to spite the conniving diva. The irony was, Haven actually had a good singing voice. The speech therapist she'd seen as a child used singing as a technique to help Haven overcome her stuttering. Ever since, Haven had loved to sing. She had no problem belting it out in the shower. It was fear of performing in front of people that caused her to clam up. The music to the song came over the speakers. It went through Haven's mind that they should turn around and face the screen so they could read the words. Then she saw the screen on the back right side of the wall. It was about 100th the size of the big screen, but large enough to easily read the words. She sang quietly at first. Then when Kat's overpowering voice circled around her like a megaphone, she increased her volume. As the song progressed, the words flowed naturally out of her mouth. Beverly, who was standing on the other side of Haven, glanced her direction, as if she were surprised. When the song ended, Beverly turned to her. "You have a beautiful voice." Haven's heart swelled, and she smiled brightly. "Thank you. You also have a beautiful voice." It was true. Beverly sang like an angel. Beverly flashed an appreciative smile. "Thank you," she said warmly. She tipped her head. "Would you mind singing Silent Night with me when we put the star on the tree?" No, she didn't want to sing a duet and bring more attention to herself. It had been hard enough to sing with the group. Still, how could she refuse Beverly, who looked at her with glowing, expectant eyes? "Sure," she heard herself say. "Fantastic." Beverly touched Haven's arm, her smile radiating warmth that flowed into her heart. As Haven went back to her seat, her mind picked up three things simultaneously. The pride shining on Wyatt's face as his gaze lingered on her, the rigid look of suspicion in Aubrey's eyes, and the hot jealousy in Kat's eyes. With some effort, Haven dismissed Aubrey and Kat and put her entire focus on Wyatt. A blanket of warmth surrounded her, and she felt like she could bask all night long in the comfort of Wyatt's affection. Connor and Noah were up next, singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. When they'd finished, Beverly took the stage. She was dressed festively in a red sweater and matching wool slacks. Haven was glad she decided on the sweater. Beverly's blue eyes, so like Wyatt's, danced with anticipation. "We'll now adjourn to the family room for our Christmas star ceremony." As the people stood, Haven turned to Wyatt. "What is that?" "You'll see," he said evasively. She laughed. "Keeping me in the dark again, huh?" He leaned in and brushed her ear with his lips, sending tantalizing ripples through her. "I wouldn't mind getting you in the dark," he said in a low, husky tone, "so I can kiss you again." The promise in his voice simmered desire in her stomach. "I'd like that," she murmured, surprised at herself for being so bold. Wyatt pulled back, his magnetic eyes caressing hers. "It's a date." He took her hands and helped her to her feet. "Come on, you're going to love this." "I love you." She blinked, processing the thought that had flitted through her mind. The rational side of her chimed in first. Her relationship with Wyatt was new, too new to classify as love. Still, she felt what she felt. There was no other name with which she could describe it. She felt deliriously happy as they walked side by side. "Look at the lovebirds," Ellie cooed, a gigantic smile filling her face. Wyatt laughed. "It is what it is, sis." He pulled Haven closer and planted a kiss on her lips. Heat wafted through Haven, partly due to attraction and partly due to embarrassment over the public display of affection. Wyatt pulled back, amusement dancing in his light eyes as if he sensed her discomfort. "Gross!" Connor halted in his tracks, stuck a finger in his throat, and bent over like he was puking. "You won't think it's gross in a few years, little man," Wyatt said. "Please don't rush things," Christopher lamented from behind them. "I'm having a hard enough time as it is keeping up with the stages." Haven assumed they were headed for the large living room on the main floor. She was surprised when they turned another direction, going into a cozy mid-sized room decorated in rich, warm tones of reds, browns, oranges, and pops of green. A black lacquer baby grand piano took up one corner of the room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were directly behind the piano. Haven's gaze traveled to the other side of the room. A fire crackled in the fireplace and stockings hung on the mantel. Off to the side was a Christmas tree that rose almost to the ceiling. Like the grand tree in the main area, it was decorated to the nines. However, this one had a homier, more whimsical feel. The lights were multicolored, and a toy train circled the bottom of the tree trunk. Most of the ornaments were homemade, and strands of popcorn were draped like garland. Tears misted Haven's eyes as she blinked a few times. This was her idea of perfection. She wanted to inspect the ornaments on the tree, see which ones Wyatt had made. She thought of her students and how they'd spent an entire day making ornaments for the tree in her classroom. This tree reminded her a little of the one in her classroom, except it was much more beautiful. Plaid red and green ribbon wound throughout, and there were clusters of red berries tucked in the branches. Haven and Wyatt sat down on one of the sofas. It was so plump and soft, Haven felt like she was sinking into a cloud. Wyatt scooted her close, sliding an arm around her shoulders. Haven looked over at the adjacent sofa and was momentarily caught off guard by the hateful expression on Kat's face. Her jealousy seemed out of place in this tranquil space. Haven resented the intrusion into the harmony. Kat's jealousy was getting old. Had she not cheated on Wyatt, the two of them might still be together. A chill raised goosebumps on Haven's arms. Maybe she was terrible for thinking this, but she was glad Kat cheated on Wyatt. Otherwise, she wouldn't be here, experiencing this magical time with a tremendous man who was turning out to be the greatest blessing in her life. Even though Haven made a point of looking in another direction, she could feel Kat's eyes burning into her. Finally, she'd had enough. Haven looked Kat in the eye, arching an eyebrow. She maintained eye contact until Kat looked away. A thrill of triumph shot through Haven. One thing she knew for certain. If she ever hoped to have a place in Wyatt's family, she'd have to develop a backbone. While the Schneiders weren't family, per se, they were close enough to the Davenports to join them for an intimate Christmas celebration. That meant they would, by default, be part of Haven's future life. Well, assuming Wyatt wanted her once he learned the truth. Haven brushed aside the miserable possibility that he might not. Wyatt would forgive her, wouldn't he? What the two of them shared didn't come along every day. This was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Surely he wouldn't get caught up on the actuality of her name. Half the time he called her Haven anyway. A hush came over the group when Beverly stepped into the center of the room holding a large, exquisitely crafted star made of crystal. The star seemed like it would be more fitting for the grand tree rather than this one. Haven got the impression something significant was about to take place, something that went beyond merely placing a star on top of a tree. The expectant expression on Wyatt's handsome face confirmed her suspicion. "Charles and I appreciate all of you coming here tonight," Beverly began. "As you know, this star and its meaning have great importance to us." She smiled tenderly at Charles. "I know you've heard the story many times, but Charles and I like repeating it." She paused, looking at Charles, who arose from his seat and strode to her side. Beverly handed him the star. His voice took on a note of nostalgia when he spoke. "This star was given to me by Maxwell Hamilton. Not only was Maxwell a mentor to me when I first started my business, but he was also a friend." Tears glittered in Charles's eyes. "Max taught me the importance of looking outside myself and caring for others. His example inspired our family to do our annual ding-dong ditch." Haven gave Wyatt a questioning look. "I'll explain it to you," he assured her quietly. Charles cleared his throat, his jaw working. "The star and accompanying poem have come to mean even more since Max died in a plane crash, leaving a young widow and 2 kids." Haven's heart clutched in surprise. Interest stirred inside her as she waited for Charles to continue. Beverly placed a hand on Charles's arms, her eyes radiating tender encouragement for him to continue. "This Christmas, I hope we'll take time to ponder over the many ways we've been blessed." His eyes moved over the room. "All of you," his voice caught, "are the greatest gifts I have. I'm so thankful for the birth of our Savior and his ultimate sacrifice, which makes it possible for us to live with him again. May we all be fixed like the Christmas star, and remember who we are." Ellie got out of her seat and stood beside her parents. In a smooth, reverential tone, she began reading the poem. "On that most important of all nights, in an event never to be forgotten, the star was placed to point the way to the greatest gift the world was ever given. A babe lying in a manger, a mother kneeling by his side. Some call it the North Star, but there are those who know its real name, the Christmas star, given on that special night to light the way for all to see. If you ever lose your way, look up to the Christmas star, your friend in the night, the one that will give you sight. You'll never stray too far to catch sight of the star. If you look to it long enough, it will lend you strength to be that flicker in the night guiding those around you. So be fixed like the star and remember who you are. No matter where you roam, it will always guide you home. All you have to do is believe, and its peace from you will never leave." Haven was overcome with emotion as tears filled her eyes. She looked at Wyatt, feeling a rush of embarrassment over the tears. Then she laughed quietly when she realized he too was crying. "That poem gets me every time," he said, mopping his eyes. "I can see why. It's beautiful." Ralph placed a ladder next to the tree. All eyes turned to Wyatt. "My turn," he said, patting Haven's leg as he stood and walked over to Charles and took the star. For a second, Haven was so caught up in the events taking place that she didn't realize Beverly was motioning to her. She rose to her feet and quickly walked over to Beverly. "We'll just sing the first verse," Beverly whispered, then looked at Aubrey, who had taken her place behind the piano. A second later, the familiar notes of Silent Night filled the air. At the same time, Wyatt climbed up the ladder holding the star. Beverly started singing right on cue, but Haven stumbled a little over the first note. Thankfully, she found her stride soon thereafter, blending her voice with Beverly's. Joy bubbled in Haven's chest as their combined voices filled the air. When the song ended, a round of applause sounded throughout the room. Haven looked up. The star was now in its rightful place. Wyatt climbed down and stood beside her. "Everyone, join in on the next one," Beverly encouraged, as they began singing Joy to the World and We Wish You a Merry Christmas. When the singing was over, Charles held up his hands. "All right, folks, that concludes the Davenport Christmas Star ceremony. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp, we'll do Ding Dong Ditch." The corners of his lips turned down. "Unfortunately, the Schneiders won't be able to join us tomorrow as they have another engagement." Haven hoped that included Kat. Even though her conversation with Kat had been limited to a brief hello and nice to meet you, Kat's animosity towards her was a dark thundercloud waiting to spill. "We'll miss you," Charles said. "We'll make it up to you next year," Neil said heartily. Charles gave him a pointed look. "I'll hold you to that." He turned his attention to the group. "We'll divide up as follows. Ralph and Marguerite will go with Beverly and me. Aubrey, Christopher, and their boys will go together." Haven was impressed how much a part of the family Ralph and Marguerite were, much more than employees. It spoke well of Wyatt's parents that they would be so inclusive. So far from what Haven could tell, any reservations that the Davenports had concerning her were owed to Bryn's party girl reputation. She certainly couldn't blame them for that. Interesting that she previously feared she wouldn't measure up to Bryn's glamorous lifestyle. The Davenports were wealthy and influential, just as she suspected, but they were also down to earth and caring. No wonder Wyatt was so kind and concerned about others. "I don't want to go with Mom and Dad," Connor whined. "I want to go with Wyatt." "Me too," Noah piped in. "Sorry, boys," Charles said. "This year you're going with your parents." The tone of his voice was final. They went puppy dog-eyed, giving Charles such pitiful expressions that Haven felt sorry for them. Evidently, Wyatt did too. "Hey, boys, what you say we pass the football around a little tomorrow morning? We can get up early and do it before we go do Ding Dong Ditch." "Yeah!" Connor pumped his fist in the air. That won't work," Aubrey said. "At least not for Noah." "Mom, why not?" Noah whined, his shoulders slumping. "Yeah, why not?" Wyatt frowned. Aubrey rolled her eyes, zeroing in on Noah. "Because you've got to practice your letters." "I hate letters," Noah huffed, kicking the couch. "Hey," Christopher warned, "don't." He gave Beverly an apologetic look. "You will work on your letters and you'll clean up your act," Aubrey warned. "He's really far behind on his schoolwork," she whispered to the adults in the room. "Behind? In kindergarten?" Wyatt scoffed. "That's ridiculous. It's Christmas. Let him be a kid." Haven was inclined to agree, but it wasn't her place to say so. Wyatt has a point, Beverly said gently. Maybe you should let Noah enjoy his Christmas. There'll be plenty of time for him to learn his letters. Aubrey's eyes narrowed to slits. Noah's my son, and I didn't ask for any advice. Her wrath was aimed at Wyatt and Beverly. Beverly touched her hair and laughed hesitantly as she glanced at the Schneiders. Let's not do this right now. Aubrey clasped her hands over her chest. Fine, she barked. She leveled a glare at Noah. But you will practice your letters tomorrow. Mom, he protested, his face caving in on itself. She held up a finger. That's final. Charles held up a hand, the controlled voice of a mediator on his lips. All right, that's enough. As I was saying, we'll divide into teams. Wyatt, Bryn, and Ellie will go together. Ellie flashed Haven a bright smile. Awesome. I can go tomorrow, Kat said, giving Wyatt a chipper smile. Haven's heart dropped. Great. Just what she needed. Kat tagging along. Lois patted Kat on the knee, giving her a funny look. No, honey, you can't. I'm hosting Christmas with my side of the family tomorrow, remember? I need your help. Oh, yeah, Kat said with a pinched expression. Charles brought his hands together. All right, it's settled. Tomorrow at 10. What's Ding Dong Ditch? Haven asked Wyatt. Before he got a chance to explain, Kat approached the couch where they were sitting. She zeroed in on Wyatt, flashing him a large, confident smile. Hey, you, she said cheerfully. Wyatt and Haven rose to their feet. Kat flung her arms around Wyatt, giving him a tight octopus hug, including as much body contact as possible. Haven felt the swift arrow of jealousy stab through her. To Wyatt's credit, he extricated himself from Kat's hug as soon as possible. I'm doing well, he said pleasantly, but Haven could tell from the slight quiver of his jaw muscle that he was uncomfortable. Kat turned her attention to Haven. Bryn and I met earlier, she cooed. Even though she was smiling, her eyes were balls of ice. Bryn was the quintessential Southern belle who could stab you in the back while simultaneously charming your socks off. I've been seeing your picture everywhere. Her voice was conspiratorial, like she and Haven were the best of friends. You have quite the reputation. Haven tensed. Your clothing lines are getting lots of attention, Kat continued smoothly with an innocent expression, but the intent of her words was crystal clear. She was taking great delight in alluding to Bryn's personal reputation. Wyatt pulled at his collar. Bryn's doing some great things. Yes, Kat drawled in amusement. Wyatt stepped closer and slid an arm around Haven's waist. For an instant, Haven caught the streaks of fury that ran through Kat's eyes, but Kat managed to mask it with another smile. She gave Wyatt a wistful look, her lips forming a petulant pout. I was hoping that you and I would be able to spend some time together. Wyatt chuckled. Unfortunately, my schedule is booked. Bryn and I have so many things on our list, we can't possibly get to them all. Too bad. A saccharine sweet smile formed over Kat's lips. Think of the fun the two of us could have had together. She trailed a finger over his arm. Those days are over, Wyatt said firmly. Haven was floored by Kat's forwardness. Normally, Haven was a confrontational person. Right this moment, however, her fingers itched to rip every styled strand of hair out of Kat's head and then box her in the jaw a few times for good measure. Your loss, Kat snipped as she turned on her heel and sauntered away like Jessica Rabbit. Haven turned to Wyatt. Wow, there aren't words. He chuckled, stroking his jaw. No, there aren't. Her eyebrows shot up. How could you have fallen for someone like her? The foibles of youth and years of familiarity between our families, he winced. Stupidity? She shook her head, thinking how much better she was for Wyatt than Kat. Then a renegade thought occurred to her, hitting her with enough force to nearly take her breath away. Wyatt had initially fallen for Bryn. Bryn and Kat were similar. Were they more Wyatt's type? He was only with Haven by default. Her throat constricted as she swallowed. Do you still have feelings for Kat? She held her breath, dreading Wyatt's answer. He shuffled out a surprised laugh. No, not in the slightest. Really? Haven's shoulders relaxed, and she couldn't stop the limp grin from spilling over her lips. Really? Wyatt turned to face her. The tender look of adoration shining in his mesmerizing eyes caused every thought to fly out of Haven's brain. All she could do was stand there like a nincompoop, staring back with googly eyes. The only woman I have feelings for is standing right in front of me." Her heart melted to a puddle of mush when she processed the meanings of his words. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted. Was this really happening? So many times she'd wished for love, fearing it might never happen to her. It was happening, though, like a rushing river threatening to sweep her away with passion and fire. Her heart did a mad dance against her chest as he leaned closer. She looked at his rugged features, the firm set of his jaw, and the all-consuming confidence in his eyes. She marveled at how Wyatt made her forget all that she'd ever been before they met. It was as if her life was starting anew the moment she met him. The second before their lips touched, Ellie stepped up. "No funny business, you two," she laughed. Wyatt's lips turned down, his brows bunching. "You ruined everything, sis." Ellie winked. "Just keeping you honest." He pulled a face. "I don't know about honest, but you're certainly keeping me at arm's length from my woman." A burst of pleasure ran through Haven. His woman. Oh, how she loved the sound of that. A lot happened in that chapter. Oh, my voice is a little hoarse. Let me start by talking about the Christmas star. Maxwell Hamilton made an appearance in False Identity. This story also takes place during Christmas, but it's romantic suspense, and it is a doozy. One of my absolute favorites. I love listening to it this time of the year. I'm always bawling like a baby at the end. The entire audiobook is available for you to listen to on YouTube, so be sure and look for that. You can find it also by going to the link below. I love the Christmas star poem. The message is so powerful, and it's an integral part of False Identity, so be sure to check that one out. I'm so glad that Haven got to sing Silent Night with Beverly. Okay, let's talk about Kat. Talk about brazen. She's not backing down, but neither is Haven. What is Ding Dong Ditch? You'll have to find out tomorrow when I read the next chapter. Here's to keeping it sweet and swoony. See y'all tomorrow.